12 months in Afghanistan felt like an eternity. The taste of desert dust was still in my mouth when I stepped back onto American soil. Sergeant Christopher Reeves, 32, finally back to civilian life. All I could think about was Rex, my 5-year-old German Shepherd, running around the backyard of my house in Maple Ridge Estates, sunny Florida. That house represented everything I had worked for, my piece of the American dream. Before leaving, I planned every detail meticulously. Mortgage, utility bills, HOA fees, everything set up for automatic payment. My cousin Derek was going to keep an eye on the property. I even made a point of meeting in person with Jessica Hartwell, the HOA president, a 45-year-old woman with an overly friendly smile and a notepad always at the ready. "Don't worry about a thing, Sergeant Reeves," she said as she shook my hand firmly. "We'll take care of your property while you're serving our country. It's the least we can do." I believed her. It was my first mistake. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to get access to more stories like this. The first notifications arrived 3 months after my deployment. An email from Derek mentioned letters from the association about the height of the grass. Strange, since he mowed the lawn weekly. Later, there was an alleged violation regarding the color of the mailbox, the same one that had been approved by the committee 2 years earlier. "I've taken care of everything, cousin." "Don't worry," Derek assured me over a video call. The connection kept dropping, his image freezing on the screen as distant explosions echoed from my base. More notices started coming in. An unauthorized welcome sign. A flower pot on the porch that blocked the pathway. Each violation came with increasing fines. $50, then $200, soon reaching absurd levels of $500 per infraction. Something's wrong, I thought during a rare phone call home. These fines don't make sense. The violations became more and more ridiculous. Improper paint hue on the windows. Excessive seasonal decoration. Unauthorized vehicle. It was Derek's car, parked in my own garage. The fines piled up quickly, reaching thousands of dollars. During a day off, I went to the Military Legal Assistance Office on base. Captain Rebecca Mendez, a 35-year-old military lawyer, listened intently as I explained my situation. "This appears extremely suspect, Sergeant," she concluded, adjusting her glasses as she reviewed the documents. "The Service Member Civil Relief Act should protect you. I'll draft a formal letter invoking the SCRA." The HOA's response was surprisingly quick and disconcerting. Jessica argued that SCRA protections didn't apply to HOA fees and fines, only to the primary mortgage. It looked like she had consulted a lawyer just to find loopholes in the law. "We will continue to charge the due amounts according to our regulations," the email said. The last sentence jumped off the screen like a threat. "Failure to resolve these pending issues will result in further actions." The unthinkable happened 6 months later. An urgent email from Derek containing a scanned notification read, "Notice of foreclosure. Auction in 30 days. My stomach dropped. The accumulated fines had been converted into a lien against my property, apparently giving the HOA the right to start a foreclosure process. "This can't be legal," I told Captain Mendez during an emergency consultation. "I'm literally serving in a war zone." "It isn't," she confirmed, her face tense. "We need someone specialized in civil law immediately. I'll put you in touch with Jonathan Turner, an attorney who has helped other service members in similar situations." Turner, a 38-year-old man experienced with military protection cases, wasted no time. "I'm going to request a temporary restraining order to stop the auction. There's something very fishy going on at Maple Ridge Estates." Turner's preliminary investigation revealed troubling connections. Kevin Bennett, Jessica Hartwell's brother-in-law, ran Premier Community Management, the company managing the condo. Even more disturbing, Andrew Hartwell, Jessica's husband, was the owner of Hartwell Investments LLC, a company known for buying properties at foreclosure auctions. The judge granted the temporary restraining order, halting the auction until a full hearing could be held. I felt a brief moment of relief. However, 2 weeks later, in the midst of a prolonged operation without communication, the unthinkable occurred. Despite the court order, the HOA went ahead with the auction. My house, appraised at $285,000, was sold for only $97,000 to Hartwell Investments. The news hit me like a physical blow. The property I had saved for years, the home to which I dreamed of returning every night under enemy fire, had been torn from me while I was defending my country thousands of miles away. When I finally returned to Florida, reality was even worse than I had imagined. A family I didn't know was living in my home. The Bennetts, Sarah and George, a couple in their 40s with 2 kids, had purchased the property after quick renovations by the Hartwells. They were innocent victims, unaware of the fraud. Rex, my canine companion, was now staying temporarily with Derek. "They can't just steal your home like that," Derek said as I watched strangers coming and going from what used to be my home. "Actually, it looks like they did," I replied, feeling determination grow inside. "But it's not going to stay that way." The living room in the temporary apartment I rented turned into a command center. Documents, folders, and scribbled notes were scattered all over the floor and every available surface. Rex lay at my side, his muzzle gently touching my leg as I sifted through pile after pile of papers for the umpteenth time. "We're building a solid case," Jonathan Turner, my attorney, assured me as he sorted documents into categories. His suit was slightly wrinkled, evidence of the long hours spent working on my case. "What the Hartwells did violates not only the SCRA but also several state and federal laws. This wasn't just an improper foreclosure, it was an elaborate conspiracy." Turner's strategy was meticulous. "First, we collected every communication record between me and the HOA. Then, we subpoenaed the association's internal records, including meeting minutes and communications between board members. Finally, we investigated broader patterns of behavior at Premier Community Management and Hartwell Investments." "The judge agreed with our discovery motion," Turner explained, holding a sheaf of freshly arrived papers. "We now have access to all of Premier's corporate emails related to your property." What we discovered was outrageous. In an email dated just 3 days after I left for Afghanistan, Jessica wrote to her brother-in-law Kevin, "We have a new potential target at Maple Ridge. A military guy, deployed for 12 months. A house appraised at $285K with only $120K left on the mortgage. Can we start the usual process?" Kevin's reply was equally incriminating. "Perfect. Let's follow the standard schedule. First notification in 60 days, then we gradually escalate. Andrew is already interested in acquiring it." We found dozens of text messages among the 3 conspirators, detailing how they would manipulate the association rules to generate fake fines, ignore my attempts at communication, and speed up the foreclosure process as soon as possible. "They deliberately targeted your home because they knew you'd be in combat and unable to fight back properly," Turner said, his normally controlled voice full of indignation. "And the worst part is you weren't the first." Our investigation deepened, and we uncovered a disturbing pattern. In the last 3 years, Hartwell Investments had acquired 7 properties through similar circumstances. 4 belonged to active-duty military members deployed overseas, and the other 3 to elderly people too ill to properly contest the fabricated violations. "It's a perfect scheme," Turner explained as we walked through the neighborhood, discreetly observing the HOA's headquarters. "They identify vulnerable property owners, fabricate violations, impose exorbitant fines, convert those fines into liens, force a foreclosure, and then buy the property for a fraction of its value through Andrew's company. They quickly renovate and resell it for a substantial profit, usually to unsuspecting families." I decided to expand our investigation. With Derek's help, I began interviewing other residents in the complex. Many were aware of the HOA's aggressive practices, but feared retaliation. An elderly lady, trembling as she spoke with us, revealed that she had paid over $3,000 in fines in recent years for violations that included an improper shade of green for her garden hose and improper placement of her medicinal plants. "I was the vice president of the HOA 5 years ago," confessed Alan Peterson, a retired teacher we met on his porch. "I resigned when Jessica and her crew took over. They started changing the rules monthly without proper notice to residents. When I questioned their practices, I was sidelined under the pretext of harmful conduct to the community. Many other board members who asked questions were also removed. As our investigation progressed, we secured testimony from Maria Gonzalez, a former employee of Premier Community Management. Her revelations were crucial. There was a specific protocol for target properties," Maria explained during our recorded interview. "First, we would send notifications to incorrect addresses, ensuring the owner didn't receive the initial warnings. Then, we accelerated the fine cycle, applying daily penalties instead of monthly fees. Finally, we escalated to foreclosure when we knew the owner would be unavailable or unable to respond." The most shocking discovery came when Turner obtained Hartwell Investments' financial records. In just 3 years, the company had profited over $600,000 from the scheme, buying houses far below market value and quickly reselling them with profit margins ranging from 40% to 70%. "This goes far beyond an improper foreclosure case," Turner stated during our meeting with Captain Mendez, who was now officially working with us. "We're talking about organized fraud, document forgery, violation of the SCRA, breach of contracts, and possible corporate profiteering." Captain Mendez nodded gravely. The Department of Justice is interested in cases involving systematic predation against service members. I'll make sure they get all our documentation. Our evidence was mounting. We obtained call records that showed Jessica had instructed the HOA secretary to deliberately ignore my attempts to contact them from Afghanistan. We found falsified documents, including inspection reports for properties that never actually happened. And the most impactful piece, a record from an HOA board meeting where the auction was approved, despite explicit mention of the court order that halted the sale. This clearly demonstrates intent, Turner explained. They knew they were violating a federal court order and went ahead anyway. It's practically an admission of guilt. With the evidence in hand, it was time to reach out to other victims of the scheme. Finding the other military victims was challenging, since many had moved after losing their homes. But through the veteran network and with help from the JAG office, we managed to locate two of them, Corporal Michael Wilson and Lieutenant Lauren Diaz. They took everything from me while I was in Iraq, Wilson shared, his voice choked. I came home with nowhere to go. I thought my automatic payment had failed or something like that. I never imagined it was all rigged. Diaz, who lost her home during a deployment in South Korea, was equally blunt. I tried fighting when I got back, but I didn't have the funds to fight a legal battle. In the end, I just gave up and started over in another state. Even now, I feel defeated for not having gotten justice. Don't worry, I assured them. We're about to expose all of this. And we're not just fighting for my house. We're fighting for justice for every one of you. As the trial day drew near, Turner and I honed our strategy. The most compelling evidence came from an unexpected source. James Foster, the administrative assistant to Kevin at Premier. When he learned about the investigation, he reached out offering information. There was a list, Foster revealed, handing over a printed spreadsheet. They called it Priority Opportunities. It was basically a list of potential foreclosure targets. I noticed that deployed military members and the elderly were always at the top. With our mountain of evidence growing, Turner secured a meeting with the state prosecutor's office. They immediately expressed interest in the case, especially when we showed them evidence that the scheme had been carried out in several communities managed by Premier. This isn't just a civil case anymore, explained the assistant prosecutor after our meeting. We're looking at potential criminal charges for organized fraud, conspiracy, and possible violations of federal consumer protection laws. The eve of the trial arrived. As we finalized our preparations, I received an unexpected phone call. It was Sarah Bennett, the woman now living in my house. We just found out what happened, she said, clearly upset. A reporter approached us with questions about the home. We had no idea. We want you to know that we would never have bought a property if we knew it was stolen from a service member. You're also victims in this story, I replied, feeling genuine sympathy for the couple. This will be resolved for all of us. That night I reviewed every document, every testimony, every piece of evidence one last time. Rex laid by my side, as if sensing the moment's importance. Tomorrow we would face the Hartwells and their scheme in open court. The fight for my house, and justice for everyone who was exploited, was finally coming to a head. The Orange County Court was packed when I entered, my military uniform perfectly pressed, medals neatly aligned on my chest. Choosing to wear my uniform wasn't just symbolic. I wanted everyone in the courtroom to remember exactly what was at stake. A soldier's home taken while he served his country. Turner and I sat at the prosecution table, documents organized in colorful folders. On the opposite side of the room, Jessica and Andrew Hartwell were tensely talking with their lawyer, a burly man named Gregory Williamson known for defending controversial real estate corporations. Kevin Bennett sat just behind them, deliberately avoiding eye contact with me. Everyone rise for the Honorable Judge Robert Wilson, announced the court official. The judge entered, a 67-year-old man with a military bearing and a piercing gaze. We later learned he was a Vietnam veteran, though he never mentioned it during the trial. Please be seated, Judge Wilson instructed, as he adjusted his glasses while reviewing the initial documents. Case number 2025 CV 4872, Reeves versus Maple Ridge Estates Homeowners Association et al. Are we ready to proceed? Yes, Your Honor, both attorneys answered almost in unison. Turner began with a methodical presentation of the facts. My military deployment, the prearranged automatic payments, the notifications about the house that started coming while I was in Afghanistan, the mounting fines, the foreclosure, and finally the sale of the property to the HOA president's husband's company. Your Honor, this isn't just a case of improper foreclosure, Turner argued, his voice calm but incisive. It's a deliberate, coordinated scheme to take advantage of a service member while he's away. violating not only the Service Members Civil Relief Act, but also constituting fraud, conspiracy, and a violation of this court's mandate that should have stopped the auction. The Hartwell's lawyer countered with technical arguments. The association followed all procedures set forth in its regulations. The violations were legitimate and documented. Sergeant Reeves was responsible for ensuring community rules were enforced, regardless of his military status. Regarding the temporary restraining order, there was an unfortunate miscommunication between offices, but there was no malice. The judge listened to both sides with an impassive expression before turning to me. "Sergeant Reeves, would you like to make a statement to the court?" I stood up, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. "Your Honor, I served my country for 8 years, including 3 deployments in combat zones. During my time in Afghanistan, I saw comrades injured and lost while we fought for American values. One of those fundamental values is protecting the rights of those who serve. I'm not here just for my house, but because no service member should have to fear that their property will be taken while they defend our nation." The judge gave a slight nod, a brief sign of acknowledgement. "Proceed with the evidence." Turner began presenting our meticulously organized documentation. First, the emails between Jessica, Andrew, and Kevin that explicitly discussed how they would target me during my absence. Next, the priority opportunities spreadsheet that systematically listed deployed military members and vulnerable seniors as preferred targets. "Objection, Your Honor. These communications are private and were obtained in a questionable manner," protested Williamson. "They were obtained via judicial subpoena during the discovery phase," Turner countered. "They are entirely admissible and extremely relevant." "Objection denied," the judge decided. "Continue, Mr. Turner." The most damning evidence was a series of text messages exchanged between Jessica and Andrew on the day of the auction. "Jessica, are we still going ahead with the auction?" Andrew, "What about the restraining order?" Jessica, "Even if that gets resolved, we'll have sold the property by then. What can they do afterwards?" Andrew, "If it works like with Wilson and Diaz, absolutely nothing." The courtroom fell into a heavy silence. Even the Hartwell's lawyer seemed momentarily at a loss for words. Turner then called James Foster, the former administrative assistant at Premier. His testimony was devastating, detailing the systematic process of fabricating violations, manipulating notification dates, and purposely coordinating with Hartwell Investments to buy foreclosed properties. "There was a set system," Foster explained, nervously adjusting his tie. "Once we identified a vulnerable owner, usually a service member or an elderly person, the process would start. Jessica would approve the violations, Premier would manage the fines, and Hartwell Investments was ready to buy at auction. Everything was coordinated between the three." During cross-examination, Williamson tried to discredit Foster by suggesting personal motives for being fired from Premier. Foster stood his ground. "I was fired because I questioned the treatment of an Iraq veteran who was pleading not to lose his home. I'm proud to have been fired for that." In the afternoon, Turner called Michael Wilson and Lauren Diaz to testify. Their stories, mirroring my own. Service members losing their homes while deployed due to the very same scheme, created an undeniable pattern of predatory behavior. The crucial moment came when Jessica Hartwell took the stand. Initially confident, her composure began to crumble under Turner's meticulous questioning. "Mrs. Hartwell, were you aware that Sergeant Reeves was deployed in Afghanistan when you started actions against his property?" "Yes, he mentioned it." "And were you aware of the Service Members Civil Relief Act that protects military members against foreclosures during active duty?" "Our lawyer told us that those protections didn't apply to HOA fees." "Then why did you not mention in any official communication that there was a court order stopping the auction?" Jessica hesitated, glancing at her lawyer. I'm not sure." Turner then presented the email in which she explicitly mentioned ignoring the restraining order. Jessica's face went pale. The testimonies continued throughout the day. Former HOA board members confirmed that Jessica had gradually altered the regulations to give the board more power to impose fines and accelerate foreclosures. Neighbors testified about the impeccable condition of my property during my absence, contradicting the alleged violations. On the witness stand, Andrew Hartwell struggled to explain why his company consistently bought only properties foreclosed by our HOA, never participating in any other auctions. Kevin Bennett couldn't justify why Premier Community Management's fees had tripled since he took over, with most of the increase coming from violation processing fees. On the third day of the trial, the courtroom was packed. Representatives from veterans groups, reporters, and curious locals filled every available seat. After hearing final arguments, Judge Wilson excused himself to deliberate and returned after just 2 hours. a sign many took as decisive. This court rarely sees a case of such calculated and systematic exploitation, the judge began, his severe tone cutting through the silence. The defendants devised a deliberate scheme to take advantage of service members during their absences as well as vulnerable elderly members of the community. He adjusted his glasses and continued. The evidence presented conclusively demonstrates that Jessica Hartwell, as HOA president, Andrew Hartwell through Hartwell Investments, and Kevin Bennett through Premier Community Management, conspired to create a fraudulent foreclosure scheme for their own financial benefit. The judge then delivered his sentence. First, the foreclosure of Sergeant Reeves's property is declared null and void, having taken place in clear violation of the Service Members Civil Relief Act and a court order. Second, I award Sergeant Reeves compensatory damages in the amount of $250,000 for the distress, emotional stress, and violation of his rights. Third, I impose additional punitive damages of $150,000 against the defendants, given the deliberate and predatory nature of their actions. Fourth, I order the defendants to establish a fund to compensate Sarah and George Bennett the full amount they paid for the property, including moving expenses and inconvenience. Fifth, I am referring this case to the State Attorney and the Department of Justice for a criminal investigation of potential state and federal law violations. Finally, I am issuing an injunction prohibiting Jessica Hartwell from serving in any capacity in homeowners associations for a period of 10 years and ordering a full audit of the operations of Premier Community Management. When the gavel struck, finalizing the decision, I felt an overwhelming surge of emotion. It wasn't just about getting my house back. It was about justice being restored not only for me, but for all the military members who had been exploited. Across the aisle, the Hartwells sat dumbfounded by the decision. The empire they had built crumbled before their eyes. Jessica covered her face with her hands, while Andrew stared at the floor. Kevin had already hurriedly left the courtroom, chased by reporters eager for statements. Turner shook my hand firmly. "We got more than we expected," he said quietly. "This goes beyond your case. It sets a precedent to protect other service members in the future." As we left the courthouse, cameras and microphones surrounded me. Reporters from every major news channel wanted statements. The case had captured national attention as a symbol of the abuse of service members. "What would you say to other military members facing similar situations?" one reporter asked. I looked directly at the camera, thinking about all my comrades still serving in distant lands, anxious about their families and homes. "Keep fighting, for our country, and for your rights. Today we proved that the system can work and that justice can prevail. And to those thinking about exploiting service members while they're on duty, know that we won't allow it." As the cameras kept flashing, I gazed at the sky, reflecting on how far I had come since those days under the relentless Afghan sun. The battle for my home was over, but a new mission was just beginning. Judge Wilson's decision sent shockwaves through the state of Florida. The morning after the verdict, the story made the front page of the Orlando Sentinel. Military man recovers home stolen while deployed. Judge awards $400,000 in damages against fraudulent HOA scheme. But the real magnitude of what we had achieved began to reveal itself in the following weeks. The state prosecutor formally opened a criminal investigation against Jessica and Andrew Hartwell, as well as Kevin Bennett. All three faced potential charges of organized fraud, conspiracy, document forgery, and obstruction of justice. The process of getting my home back wasn't instant. Sarah and George Bennett, the innocent buyers, would need time to find a new residence. Turner worked tirelessly to ensure that they received fair compensation and relocation assistance. "We don't hold any grudges against you," Sarah told me during our first meeting after the trial. "We were in the backyard of the house, my house, which was temporarily still theirs. In fact, we feel terrible for being an unwitting part of this scheme." "You were also deceived," I replied, noticing the small changes they had made. "A new swing set for the kids. Realigned flower beds. The judge ensured that you will be fully compensated." George nodded, visibly relieved. "We've been looking at houses on the west side of town. Maybe it's a hidden blessing. We always wanted to be closer to the schools." While awaiting the transition, I stayed at the temporary apartment with Rex, who seemed to sense that something significant had changed. His behavior was more upbeat, as if he understood that we would be going home soon. Turner and I continued working together, helping other victims of the scheme seek justice. Michael Wilson and Lauren Diaz filed similar lawsuits, using our case as a precedent. In less than a month, 5 other lawsuits had been opened against Premier Community Management and various homeowners associations across the state. Captain Mendez, who had assisted me from the beginning, organized a workshop on base to educate soldiers about their rights under the SCRA and how to protect their properties during deployments. I was invited to be the keynote speaker. "Knowledge is your first line of defense," I told the young soldiers filling the room. Many were about to leave on their first deployments overseas. "Document everything, set up reliable power of attorney, and know your rights. What happened to me shouldn't happen to any of you." One of the most satisfying moments came when, after significant pressure from other homeowners, the entire board of the Maple Ridge Estates Homeowners Association resigned. A new election was held, with owners committed to transparency and justice assuming the positions. The new board's first action was to invite an independent auditor to review all fines and foreclosure actions from the past 5 years. "We found at least 17 cases of potentially fraudulent fines," Elaine Gomez, the new president and a retired accountant of 62, informed me. "We're working to reimburse everyone affected." Premier Community Management faced even harsher consequences. After the negative publicity and the ongoing criminal investigation, their contracts began to be canceled by condominiums all over the county. In less than 2 months, the company closed its doors permanently. Kevin Bennett tried to start a new business under a different name, but the story was already well known in the local real estate scene. Jessica and Andrew Hartwell not only faced legal problems, but were also ostracized by the community they had exploited for so long. They put their own mansion up for sale, and, according to rumors, planned to leave the state entirely. Hartwell Investments was dissolved, with its assets frozen pending investigation. 3 months after the verdict, the day I had been waiting for finally arrived. The Bennetts had found a new home and were moving out. Turner called me early that morning. "Are you ready to come home, Sergeant?" We met at the property's entrance. The Bennetts were loading the last of the boxes into their moving truck. We exchanged embraces and sincere goodbyes. There was no bitterness between us, just a shared understanding that we had all been manipulated by unscrupulous people. When the moving truck finally drove away, I stood alone at the front door with Rex by my side, his tail wagging in anticipation. Turner handed me a set of new keys. "Legally, this house was never not yours. But symbolically, I think you deserve this moment." I took a deep breath and opened the front door. The interior looked different. The Bennetts had made some renovations, painted the walls in different tones, replaced a few fixtures. But the structure, the spaces, the essence, it was still my home. "Welcome back, Rex," I whispered, as my canine companion ran through the house, re-examining every corner as if reclaiming his territory. I followed him slowly, touching the walls and reconnecting with the space that had meant so much to me during those long months in the Afghan desert. The $400,000 settlement brought not just justice, but new possibilities. I decided to use part of the money to turn my experience into something positive. After consulting with Turner, I created a nonprofit foundation dedicated to providing free legal aid for service members facing property disputes during or after active duty. "Let's call it the Homefront Justice Foundation," I suggested during our planning meeting, to remind everyone that fighting for justice here at home is just as important as fighting for freedom abroad. Turner agreed to serve as the foundation's chief legal advisor, offering a few hours of pro bono work each month. Captain Mendez helped establish connections with the Department of Defense and veterans organizations. Within weeks, we had already received assistance requests from service members in 5 different states. "Your story has inspired many to speak up," Mendez explained during one of our meetings. "People who had given up fighting for their homes are now seeking justice, thanks to your example." The media continued to follow the case, especially after formal criminal charges were filed against the Hartwells and Bennett. A producer even approached me about the possibility of a documentary, something I considered cautiously, mainly for the potential to raise awareness about the problem. The following months were filled with small moments of restoration. I replanted the herb garden I had cultivated before my deployment. I repainted the living room in the exact shade of blue I always loved. I replaced the mailbox, the very one that had sparked one of the first fraudulent fines, with a new one decorated with the U.S. Army emblem. And every morning, following a routine that quickly became sacred, I raised 2 flags on the mast I had installed in the front yard, the American flag and the Army flag. It was my way of saying, this is a soldier's home. This place was defended twice, abroad and at home. 1 year after the historic verdict, I sat on the front porch watching the sunset paint the Florida sky in shades of orange and pink. Rex slept peacefully by my side, now a calmer companion at 6 years old. In the distance, I could hear the familiar sound of children playing in the community park, a park which, ironically, had been partially funded by the punitive damages the Hartwells paid to the Homeowners Association. The changes inspired by our case had spread far beyond Maple Ridge Estates. The most significant change came 6 months after the trial, when the governor of Florida signed the Reeves Military Property Protection Act, legislation that drastically strengthened protections for service members against predatory foreclosures and imposed severe penalties on homeowners associations that violated those protections. The signing of this law sends a clear message, the governor declared during the ceremony, for which I was invited as a guest of honor. Florida will protect those who risk their lives defending our nation. The law required HOAs to verify military status before initiating any foreclosure actions, established a mandatory grace period for returning service members, and created an oversight mechanism to review all fines imposed on the properties of deployed members. Lawmakers in other states began developing similar proposals. Within a year, 4 states had introduced their own versions of the Reeves Act, and discussions about federal legislation to standardize these protections nationwide were underway. The criminal case against the Hartwells and Bennett advanced slowly through the judicial system. Jessica and Andrew accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to reduced charges in exchange for testifying against others involved in the scheme. They received sentences of 5 years probation, additional financial restitution to the victims, and a lifetime ban from working in the real estate sector. Kevin Bennett chose to face trial, was found guilty on most charges, and received a sentence of 30 months in prison. The Homefront Justice Foundation flourished beyond my most optimistic expectations. In the first year, we helped 47 service members resolve property disputes, either by recovering their homes or obtaining compensation in 32 cases. Companies and law firms began offering pro bono services, expanding our capacity to help. What started as your personal fight turned into a movement, Turner observed during our 1-year celebration of the foundation. Not only did you get your home back, but you changed the system. My military career also evolved. After the case, I was promoted to first sergeant and assigned to work with the base's civilian affairs office, helping other service members navigate legal and financial issues before and after deployments. My personal experience became a valuable tool for educating young soldiers on how to protect their interests while serving. The Maple Ridge Estates community also transformed. Under the new leadership, the Homeowners Association became a model of transparency and responsible governance. The rules were simplified, the appeals process for fines was reformed to ensure fairness, and the entire board began being elected annually with term limits. We ended up creating the most transparent HOA in the state, Elaine Gomez commented during a community meeting. Sometimes you have to go through a crisis to find a better path. The Bennetts, Sarah and George, eventually became friends. Their daughters occasionally visited to play with Rex, who enjoyed the extra attention. They thrived in their new home, and Sarah even ran for and was elected to the local school board, inspired by my fight for justice. The other victims of the Hartwells scheme also found various forms of resolution. Michael Wilson used his settlement to start a small landscaping business that now primarily employed veterans. Lauren Diaz, although she never got her original home back, received enough compensation for a down payment on a new property and became a vocal advocate for the rights of military homeowners. In an unexpected turn of events, a streaming studio produced a documentary about the case titled Homefront: A Soldier's Battle for Justice. The film not only told my story, but also exposed systemic problems in homeowners associations across the country, sparking national discussions about reform and regulation. 2 years after recovering my home, I received an invitation to speak before Congress during a hearing on property protections for service members. Sitting in front of the committee, I shared not just my personal experience, but also the broader lessons learned. When we serve abroad, we trust that our country will protect not only our families, but also our homes and properties, I testified. This isn't a partisan issue. It's about honoring the agreement we make with those willing to sacrifice everything for our nation. The resulting federal legislation, which incorporated many of the protections from Florida's Reeves Act, was passed with bipartisan support and signed by the president the following year. On a quiet night, 3 years after the verdict, I sat in the backyard with Turner, Mendez, and a few other friends who had been instrumental in the fight for my home. Rex wandered among us, always alert for a stray morsel from our barbecue plates. "Have you ever thought about moving?" Mendez asked, noticing the improvements I had made to the property over the years. "After everything that happened here, no one would blame you for wanting a fresh start somewhere else." I looked at my home, the new windows I had installed, the expanded deck where we sat, the small memorial in the corner of the garden dedicated to friends lost in Afghanistan. This house now means something bigger, I replied after a moment's reflection. It's not just about walls and a roof. It's about the right to come home, the right to have a place that's truly yours no matter where duty takes you. Turner raised his bottle in a toast. To the house that became a symbol, and to the battles worth fighting, I added, toasting with my friends. That night, after everyone had left, I took my habitual walk around the property's perimeter with Rex at my side. We stopped by the flagpole at the front of the house. The flags had been taken down at sunset, carefully folded and stored to be raised again in the morning. That daily ritual, raising the flags at dawn and taking them down at dusk, became more than just a military tradition for me. It was a reminder that our freedom, like our homes, requires constant vigilance, that justice doesn't always come easily, but it's worth fighting for, and that sometimes the most important battles aren't fought in distant lands, but right here in our courts, legislatures, and communities. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to get access to more stories like this. As I looked at my house, its warm lights glowing against the Florida night sky, I felt a deep sense of completeness. The home I had fought so hard for had become more than just a place to live. It had become a symbol of resilience, a monument to justice, and finally, a true home. Rex rested his muzzle on my hand, as if sensing my thoughts. "Let's go inside, buddy," I whispered. "We're home."